Ancient temples were the world's first databases, vast libraries of knowledge built from stone and memory. Long before the digital age, these sacred spaces preserved everything from astronomy and medicine to law and history, shaping the very course of human development. By the end of this journey, you will see these monumental structures in a completely new light, understanding how they laid the groundwork for our modern information age. How did priests organize data without computers, and what ingenious methods kept this knowledge safe for centuries? What hidden connection do you see between our digital present and these ancient stone archives? Think of a knowledge system as the operating system for an entire civilization. It is a structured method for collecting, organizing, storing, and retrieving information. Our modern world runs on digital databases, vast server farms that hold countless bytes of data. But in the ancient world, the temple was that server farm, an analog database built from stone and scroll, from ritual and memory. These were not haphazard collections of artifacts. They were meticulously curated, centralized repositories where priest scholars acted as both programmers and librarians, encoding data into every available medium. The primary goal was always the same: to ensure the accuracy, accessibility, and long-term preservation of vital knowledge. This was not a passive archive. It was a living, breathing institution designed to outlast any single individual or generation. What made these temple systems truly revolutionary was their interdisciplinary nature. They did not separate science from spirituality or administration from art. A single temple complex could be a university, a government archive, a medical school, and a spiritual center all at once. Consider the great library of a temple in ancient Egypt. Within its halls, you would find meticulously copied papyri on surgical procedures lying near precise astronomical charts used to predict the Nile's flood, which were in turn stored alongside the sacred rituals for the pharaoh's afterlife. This was a completely integrated worldview. The movement of a star was a message from a god, a mathematical truth, and a practical guide for planting crops. Understanding this foundational role of the temple as a holistic knowledge center is crucial. It shifts our perspective from seeing them merely as places of worship to recognizing them as the intellectual powerhouses of their age. This integrated design raises a compelling question. How did the very architecture of these places physically protect and organize such a vast and diverse body of knowledge? The stones themselves began to speak. Walk through the grand entrance of an Egyptian temple at dawn on the summer solstice, and you would witness a beam of sunlight piercing the inner sanctum, illuminating the statue of a god. This was not a happy accident of design. It was a precise, permanent astronomical instrument carved from granite. The temple's alignment with the sun, moon, and stars transformed its architecture into a massive, immovable calendar, tracking seasons with a reliability that paper could never promise. Every pillar, every wall was a page in a stone encyclopedia. Inscriptions carved deep into their surfaces recorded everything from royal decrees and tax laws to the genealogies of kings, ensuring that this data would outlive empires. The very layout of the temple was a map of the cosmos. A labyrinth of corridors and chambers might mirror the path of the soul through the afterlife, or represent the celestial spheres, embedding profound philosophical concepts into the floor plan itself. Consider the Mesopotamian ziggurat, its stepped levels rising towards the heavens. Its design was a physical argument, a statement about the connection between the human world and the divine. To climb it was to understand a core spiritual principle. This architectural genius solved a critical problem: how to preserve vast quantities of knowledge against fire, flood, or the slow decay of papyrus and parchment. The information was safe, literally set in stone, accessible to any priest who knew how to read the building's sacred language. But who were these keepers of the code, the human element that brought this stone library to life? These priest scholars were the living, breathing processors of the ancient world. From childhood, they were selected for their intellect and memory, undergoing a grueling education designed to forge them into perfect vessels for sacred knowledge. Their minds became the primary storage device, far more reliable than any fragile papyrus scroll. In ancient India, generations of Brahmins committed the entire Vedas to memory, a collection of hymns and rituals so vast it would take days to recite. They didn't just learn the words, they mastered intricate phonetic and melodic techniques to ensure that every syllable, every tonal inflection, was passed down with flawless precision across centuries. This was a human-powered backup system, ensuring that even if every physical copy was lost, the knowledge itself would survive. But their role extended far beyond recitation. These priestly scribes were also the system administrators. They meticulously updated records of harvests and tax collections on clay tablets, creating the earliest forms of accounting. They diagnosed illnesses and compiled medical texts, mixing practical herbal remedies with spiritual incantations, a blend that represented the totality of their understanding. By controlling who was taught to read and write the complex hieroglyphic or cuneiform scripts, they effectively controlled access to the entire database. This gatekeeping reinforced the social order, but it also served a protective function, safeguarding state secrets and advanced astronomical data from being misunderstood or misused. This combination of human memory and written record created a dynamic, living library. Knowledge wasn't locked away gathering dust, it was constantly in use, being consulted, debated, and amended by each new generation of priests. They were the curators, the troubleshooters, and the innovators, ensuring the temple's vast stores of information remained relevant and actionable. This reliance on the human mind and hand raises a fascinating question. What specific tools and revolutionary technologies did these ancient librarians invent to manage their ever-growing collections of data? But to process all this information, the priests needed more than just their own memories. They built the world's first hard drives and filing systems, not from silicon, but from clay and reed. The invention of writing was the single greatest upgrade to the temple's operating system. In Mesopotamia, a scribe would press the sharp end of a stylus into a wet clay tablet, creating the wedge-shaped marks we call cuneiform. Once baked in the sun or a kiln, that tablet became a permanent record, immune to water and time. In Egypt, they developed hieroglyphics, a beautiful and complex script painted on papyrus scrolls or carved into temple walls. These were not just pretty pictures, they were a sophisticated technology for data storage. Think of a stylus and a clay tablet as the ancient equivalent of a keyboard and a solid-state drive, a durable, portable medium for saving information. Papyrus scrolls were the cloud storage of their day, lighter and able to hold vast amounts of text, though more vulnerable to fire or decay. With these tools, a temple scribe could do far more than just record a prayer. He could create a searchable archive. In the storerooms of a Sumerian temple, you would find thousands of these tablets, each one a single file. Some documented the exact number of sheep and barrels of grain received as offerings, the earliest accounting ledgers. Others held complex legal contracts or recorded the movements of the planet Venus across the night sky. They were often organized in labeled baskets or on shelves, grouped by subject, creating a physical database you could literally walk through. This act of writing transformed knowledge. It externalized information from the fragile human mind onto a stable, physical object. A complex mathematical calculation could now be checked by another scribe. An astronomical observation recorded 1 year could be compared to another made 50 years later, revealing patterns invisible to any single lifetime. This was the birth of true data analysis. The knowledge was no longer trapped inside one person's head. It existed independently, ready to be consulted, cross-referenced, and built upon by generations to come. But what kind of knowledge was considered so vital that it warranted this revolutionary level of organization and preservation? The sheer scope of information housed within temple walls was staggering. These were not specialized archives, but vast, interdisciplinary collections that sustained entire civilizations. Astronomy was a primary focus, with priests meticulously tracking the heavens. Their detailed star charts and eclipse predictions were far more than celestial maps. They were the agricultural calendar for the entire kingdom. Knowing precisely when the Nile would flood or the optimal time to plant seeds was a matter of survival, and this critical data was calculated and disseminated from the temple. The same astronomical observations also dictated the timing of major religious festivals, seamlessly weaving practical necessity into the fabric of spiritual life. Medical knowledge flourished within these sacred spaces, documented in comprehensive scrolls. The Ebers Papyrus from ancient Egypt is a perfect example, a massive text detailing diagnoses, herbal remedies, and even surgical procedures for everything from broken bones to dental work. While some treatments involved spiritual incantations, many were based on careful observation and a growing understanding of the human body, representing an early form of empirical science stored for future generations of healers. The very walls of the temples served as public record offices. Legal codes were often inscribed directly onto stone monoliths or temple facades, outlining societal laws, rights, and punishments for all to see. This public display of the law, like the famous Code of Hammurabi, rooted justice in divine authority and ensured a degree of consistency across the land. Alongside these laws, temples preserved history itself. Scribes recorded the genealogies of kings, the outcomes of great battles, and the boundaries of the kingdom, creating an official, enduring narrative of the state. Mythological texts and epic poems, such as the Enuma Elish from Mesopotamia, were carefully copied and preserved. These stories were not mere entertainment. They encoded a culture's core beliefs about the creation of the world, the nature of the gods, and the moral principles that guided human conduct. They were the foundational software of the culture's identity, and underpinning it all was rigorous economic data. Temples were often the largest landowners and economic centers in a region. Their scribes kept meticulous logs of trade, inventory of grain and livestock, and records of resource allocation, managing vast estates with the precision of a modern corporation. This incredible variety reveals the temple's true function as a civilization's central processing unit. It integrated science, law, history, religion, and economics into a single, cohesive system. Every piece of information, from a star's position to a bushel of wheat, was a data point that helped society function and endure. To see this system in action, we must now journey to specific locations and witness these ancient databases operating at the peak of their power. The ambition of the temple as a knowledge center reached its zenith in a place that was not a temple in name, but one in spirit, the legendary Library of Alexandria. While formerly part of a royal museum, this institution embodied the ultimate temple function, a universal repository for all the world's wisdom. Its mission was audacious: to collect every single scroll from every known civilization. Greek philosophy, Egyptian medical texts, Babylonian astronomy, they sought it all. This was not a passive collection. It was an aggressive, state-funded operation to centralize global knowledge. The library employed a small army of scholar-scribes whose sole task was to copy, translate, and categorize every text that entered its doors. They did not merely store scrolls, they processed them, creating standardized editions and vast catalogs that acted as the search engine for this ancient internet. The methods of acquisition were famously ruthless. Any ship docking in Alexandria's harbor was searched for books. If a scroll was found, it was confiscated by the library's officials, who would have it copied. The original was often kept for the master collection, while the copy was reluctantly returned to the owner. This practice reveals a startling truth. The drive to compile a complete dataset was considered more important than individual property rights. The library was the cloud server of the ancient Mediterranean, and every visiting ship was a potential data transfer. The scale of this loss is almost incomprehensible. When the library was eventually destroyed through a series of fires and conflicts, it was not just a building that burned, it was a catastrophic system failure. Tens of thousands of unique scrolls containing plays, scientific theories, and historical accounts from countless cultures vanished forever. This single event set entire fields of knowledge back by centuries, a stark reminder of how fragile these concentrated systems could be. Alexandria demonstrates the ultimate potential of the temple model, a centralized, state-backed hub with a universalist goal. Yet, this grand ambition was built upon foundations laid thousands of years earlier, in the very first temples of Mesopotamia, where the art of data management began with the humble task of counting sheep. Deep within the temple of Ina in the city of Uruk, a scribe's hands moved with practiced efficiency. His stylus pressed into a damp clay tablet, marking not a prayer or a king's decree, but a simple economic fact. 16 sheep received from a merchant named Gula. This single, unglamorous record was a critical piece of a much larger system. Temples like Ina were the economic engines of Mesopotamia, functioning as state treasuries, central banks, and distribution hubs all at once. Their vast estates produced enormous quantities of barley, wool, and livestock, and every single item was meticulously accounted for. Scribes did not simply list goods, they developed a full accounting language, using standardized units like the selah for grain and the shekel for weight. This consistency was vital, transforming a chaotic flow of resources into a structured, analyzable dataset. They tracked everything from the daily rations of workers to the output of weaving workshops, creating a real-time ledger of the entire temple economy. This was data with an immediate, practical purpose. By calculating the surplus from a good harvest, administrators could plan for lean years, trade with neighboring cities, and allocate labor for massive construction projects. The temple's archive rooms were filled with thousands of these economic tablets, a physical database of clay that allowed priests to see the financial health of the city-state at a glance. But the system went beyond simple inventory. The same scribes who counted sheep also drafted legally binding contracts for business partnerships, loans, and property sales, all written in the precise, durable script of cuneiform. These contracts were then sealed and stored in the temple archive, making it the official repository for commercial law. This integration of economic data and legal authority gave the system its power. A dispute over a debt or a trade agreement could be settled by retrieving the original tablet, a permanent record that carried the weight of both the state and the gods. This meticulous record-keeping was the bedrock of societal stability. It allowed for the predictable distribution of food during famines, the organized payment of large workforces, and the complex logistics of long-distance trade. The temple, through its data, became the central nervous system of the early city, its scribes processing information to ensure the entire body politic functioned smoothly. The integrity of this data was paramount, a concept we understand well in our digital age, just as we rely on accurate financial spreadsheets and secure transaction logs. The Mesopotamians understood that their society depended on the precision and trustworthiness of every mark in the clay. This drive for perfect data integrity, born from the need to count sheep and measure grain, would find a stunning parallel thousands of miles away, where priest astronomers tracked the movements of planets with the same relentless precision, carving the cycles of time itself into the walls of their jungle temples. High in the jungle canopy, the stone towers of Chichen Itza stood silent against the night sky. Their design was a secret waiting for the right moment. On the spring equinox, the setting sun would cast a series of triangular shadows down the main pyramid, creating the illusion of a massive serpent slithering down the staircase. This was no decorative flourish. It was a precise astronomical event encoded in architecture, a calendar marker announcing the change of seasons to the entire civilization. The Mayan temple was a living observatory, its doorways, corners, and staircases aligned with the solstices, equinoxes, and the cyclical paths of Venus. The priests who operated this system were master data analysts. They tracked the complex 584-day cycle of Venus, a planet they associated with war and rain, with an accuracy that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. These observations were not kept in memory alone. They were meticulously recorded on tall, carved stone pillars called stelae and in painted bark paper books known as codices. One of the few surviving texts, the Dresden Codex, is essentially an astronomical almanac. Its pages contain detailed tables that predict the movements of Venus and the timing of solar eclipses, allowing the priests to forecast celestial events far into the future. This data was the engine of Mayan society. The precise calendar born from these celestial observations dictated the optimal times for planting and harvesting maize, the staple crop that fed the population. It also scheduled the elaborate religious ceremonies that maintained the cosmic order, linking the actions of the people directly to the rhythm of the heavens. The survival of the city and the favor of the gods were two sides of the same coin, both dependent on the accurate data compiled and stored by the temple priests. This perfect integration of astronomy, agriculture, and spirituality reveals the Mayan temple as a quintessential knowledge system, a central processor using celestial data to sustain its civilization. But how did they move from observing the stars to creating a permanent, communicable record? The answer lies in the evolution of their most revolutionary tool, a symbolic language that could capture the cosmos itself. The very walls of these temples were dense with a different kind of code. Beyond the straightforward records of kings and harvests, priest architects embedded a deeper, symbolic language into the stone. They understood that the most profound truths about life, the universe, and human nature are often abstract, difficult to capture with simple words or numbers. So they turned to myth and symbol, creating a resilient, multi-layered system for transmitting wisdom. Walk through the columned halls of an Egyptian temple, and you are not just seeing art, you are reading a philosophical text carved in stone. The story of the god Osiris, murdered and dismembered only to be resurrected by his wife Isis, was not merely a thrilling tale. For the initiated, it was a powerful allegory for the annual flooding and receding of the Nile, the death and rebirth of crops, and even the cyclical nature of the human soul. This single myth compacted complex observations about agriculture, astronomy, and theology into a single, unforgettable narrative. Anyone could hear the story, but those trained in the temple's mysteries understood the deeper scientific and moral principles encoded within it. This method ensured that even if every papyrus scroll turned to dust, the core ideas would live on in the popular imagination, passed down orally from parent to child. In the East, this symbolic encoding reached an incredible level of sophistication. Hindu and Buddhist temples often feature intricate circular diagrams called mandalas. To the untrained eye, they are breathtaking geometric patterns, but to a student, a mandala is a detailed cosmological map and a guide for spiritual practice. Its concentric squares and circles represent the structure of the universe, with a sacred center symbolizing the ultimate reality or a primary deity. Meditating upon the mandala was not a passive act, it was an active process of internalizing this cosmic geography, of navigating the layers of one's own consciousness to reach enlightenment. The temple itself was often designed as a three-dimensional mandala, its layout mirroring the sacred diagram, so that simply walking through its spaces was a lesson in cosmic order. This reliance on symbol and geometry was universal. The architects of Gothic cathedrals used sacred numerology, where the dimensions of a building, the number of pillars, or the count of stained glass windows held theological significance, reflecting a belief in a universe built from divine mathematics. This layer of esoteric encoding transformed the temple from a simple archive into a multi-sensory educational tool. It stored knowledge not just in ledgers, but in the very experience of the space, in the stories told by its art, and in the rituals performed within its walls. This ensured the data was not only preserved, but felt and understood on a deeper level. Such a sophisticated system of symbolic communication required a dedicated process to unlock its meanings, pointing to the temple's final and most vital function as a living school. These stone libraries were not silent vaults, they were vibrant classrooms echoing with the voices of students. The temple was, in its most active form, a school, and this educational function was the vital process that kept the entire knowledge system from becoming a static archive. Within dedicated chambers, novice priests and scribes underwent rigorous training, mastering the complex skills needed to read the sacred scripts, perform precise astronomical calculations, and administer the temple's vast economic holdings. The curriculum was comprehensive, covering reading, writing, mathematics, and the specialized sciences of the day. In ancient Greece, temples dedicated to the healer god Asclepius functioned as the world's first medical schools. Patients would sleep in special halls, believing the god would visit them in dreams with a diagnosis or cure. But the real learning happened when priest-physicians, acting as mentors, interpreted these dreams alongside their own practical observations. They meticulously recorded successful treatments and puzzling symptoms on stone tablets, creating a growing database of case studies for their apprentices to study. This blend of spiritual belief and empirical observation trained new generations of doctors, ensuring medical knowledge was both preserved and refined through direct experience. A similar system of oral transmission flourished in the Vedic schools of India. Students lived within the temple precincts, committing immense volumes of sacred hymns and philosophical texts to memory through constant recitation. But this was far more than rote learning. The students engaged in spirited debates, analyzing the subtle meanings of the texts and applying philosophical principles to new questions. This dynamic environment did not just pass information along, it tested it, challenged it, and allowed each generation to add its own layer of insight. The curriculum was deliberately hierarchical. A novice might begin by learning the proper pronunciation of ritual verses, while deeper knowledge, like the advanced mathematical concepts needed to design a fire altar or the esoteric meanings behind the constellations, was reserved for senior initiates who had proven their dedication and intellect. This gatekeeping was not merely about control, it was a form of quality control. It ensured that the most powerful and complex ideas were only handled by those with the proper training and maturity to understand their implications. This system of mentorship and formal education created a self-perpetuating cycle of expertise. The masters taught the apprentices, who eventually became masters themselves, all working within the same institutional framework. This constant renewal of intellectual talent meant the temple's databases were not frozen in time. They were living, evolving repositories, constantly updated with new observations, corrected calculations, and fresh interpretations. The temple school was the engine of innovation, ensuring that the civilization's operating system never became obsolete. This seamless fusion of science and spirit was the very architecture of ancient thought. There was no bright line dividing the laboratory from the sanctuary, because to the priest-scholar they were one and the same room. A Babylonian priest tracking the path of Jupiter was not merely an astronomer, he was a divine messenger. His meticulous clay tablet records of the planet's retrograde loops were simultaneously precise scientific data and a crucial effort to decipher the will of the gods. An irregular celestial event like a comet or an eclipse was not just a predictable orbital phenomenon, it was an omen, a critical piece of divine communication that required interpretation to guide the king's decisions. The same data stream served two masters, the pursuit of empirical pattern recognition and the necessity of theological insight, and neither was considered more true than the other. This integrated mindset created a powerful feedback loop. The spiritual importance of celestial events justified the immense resources and centuries of effort required to observe them with such exacting care. This, in turn, produced scientific data of breathtaking accuracy that might otherwise never have been compiled. The faith funded the science, and the science validated the framework of the faith. We see a parallel synthesis in the healing traditions that emerged from temples. In ancient India, the Ayurvedic texts preserved in temple libraries present a complete system of health that is utterly holistic. A remedy for a fever was not just a prescription for specific herbs, it was a regimen that included dietary changes, physical treatments, and spiritual practices like meditation or the chanting of mantras. The illness itself was diagnosed as an imbalance not only of bodily humors but of life energy or prana. The healer priest addressed the patient as an integrated being of body, mind, and spirit. A treatment was not considered successful if it only alleviated the physical symptom. It had to restore harmony to the whole person. This approach ensured that medical knowledge was never reduced to a mere technical manual. It remained woven into a larger philosophical and spiritual tapestry, which gave it a profound cultural resilience. When knowledge is compartmentalized, a shift in political power or a cultural revolution can easily discard a single branch of learning. But when medical science is entangled with a society's deepest spiritual beliefs about life and purpose, it becomes far harder to erase. The temple safeguarded astronomy by making it a form of prayer. It preserved medicine by framing it as a sacred duty. This synergy was not a limitation but a source of incredible strength. It meant that every scientific observation reinforced the cultural worldview, and every spiritual practice provided a vessel for practical knowledge to be transmitted. The system was designed for longevity, its threads so tightly interwoven that they could not be easily pulled apart. This profound integration raises a final, critical question. How did these ancient systems ultimately decline, and what fragments of their wisdom managed to survive the collapse of their stone walls? These ancient librarians understood a terrifying truth that all data is fragile. A single fire, one invading army, or even just the slow, relentless dampness of time could erase centuries of accumulated wisdom in an instant. So they engineered a multi-layered defense, a system of backups and safeguards that would make a modern IT manager nod in approval. Their first and most powerful tool was redundancy. They did not trust a single copy of a sacred text or a vital astronomical chart. Scribes would painstakingly reproduce important works on the most durable materials available. In Egypt, key religious spells from the pyramid texts were carved not only on papyrus, but also onto the granite walls of the burial chambers themselves, ensuring the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife was literally set in stone. In Mesopotamia, critical legal decrees and treaties were inscribed on clay tablets, but also duplicated on polished stone monuments erected in public squares. This was the ancient equivalent of saving a file to your hard drive, a backup server, and printing a hard copy for the vault. The human mind itself was a primary backup medium. The oral tradition was not a separate system. It was an integral part of data preservation. Priests in cultures from India to Ireland committed entire epics and genealogies to memory, using sophisticated rhythmic and melodic structures to prevent corruption of the text over generations. This created a living, breathing archive that could walk, talk, and survive any physical catastrophe. If a library burned, these human servers could simply recite the lost texts back into existence, allowing scribes to begin the process of physical reproduction all over again. They also thought strategically about the storage environment itself. Egyptian temple architects often placed their library chambers, known as the House of Life, in the driest, most secure parts of the complex, protecting the precious papyrus scrolls from the destructive Nile humidity. In Mesopotamia, where fire was a constant threat, scribes stored their finished clay tablets in sturdy, sealed ceramic jars. These jars were then organized on shelves in dedicated archive rooms, protecting the data from water, fire, and casual damage. It was a literal firewall for information. This meticulous, multi-pronged approach to preservation reveals a profound understanding of risk management. They were not merely storing knowledge, they were actively fighting entropy. By distributing copies across different media and different locations, they ensured that no single point of failure could destroy their civilization's memory. The success of this system is why we can read the code of Hammurabi today, or know the precise movements of Venus from a Mayan codex. This relentless drive to protect knowledge did not just preserve it in isolation. It created stable, portable packets of information that could travel, allowing these temple hubs to connect with each other across vast distances, weaving a nascent web of global understanding. The great temples of the ancient world were not isolated fortresses of knowledge, but bustling international ports of ideas. Long before the internet, these sacred spaces formed a planetary web, connecting distant cultures through the travels of traders, scholars, and diplomats. A merchant caravan stopping at a Buddhist temple along the Silk Road did more than just pray, it exchanged goods. Alongside silk and spices, these travelers carried precious scrolls containing advanced astronomical charts or medical treatises. Monks in China might share their detailed star maps with scholars from the Middle East, who in turn brought new mathematical concepts that were eagerly copied and stored within the temple's library. This was a constant, vibrant cross-pollination of human understanding. Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato were known to have studied for years within the inner sanctums of Egyptian temples, absorbing millennia of accumulated wisdom about geometry, astronomy, and metaphysics. They did not merely visit as tourists, they enrolled as students, bringing these profound insights back to the Mediterranean world, where they would become the bedrock of Western science and philosophy. The flow of knowledge was a two-way street, enriching every database it touched. Perhaps the most revolutionary example of this exchange was the journey of Indian numerals. Hindu mathematicians had developed the concept of zero and a decimal place value system, breakthroughs meticulously preserved and refined within temple schools. This powerful mathematical technology was carried westward by traders and scholars into the Arab world, where it was adopted and enhanced. From there, it eventually entered medieval Europe, replacing the cumbersome Roman numeral system and unleashing a new era of scientific and commercial calculation. The simple digits we use today are a direct legacy of this ancient temple-facilitated network. This interconnectedness reveals the temples as the original nodes in a global brain, fostering collaborations that transcended language and empire. True innovation rarely blooms in isolation. It is almost always the product of shared wisdom, a conversation across centuries and continents. This flow of ideas was made possible by a suite of specialized tools, the ancient equivalents of our modern software and hardware, which allowed priest scholars to process and transmit this ever-growing river of data. The ingenuity of the temple extended far beyond its walls, into the specialized tools its keepers engineered to process their growing rivers of data. For complex calculations that overwhelmed human memory, they invented the abacus. With beads sliding on rods, a priest could compute vast sums of grain or track planetary cycles with a speed and accuracy that mental arithmetic could not match. This was the ancient world's calculator, a portable processing unit for managing the economic and astronomical data that fueled the civilization. To measure the immutable flow of time itself, they built sophisticated water clocks. In places like the Temple of Ammon in Egypt, a regulated trickle of water from one vessel to another marked the passing hours with a consistency that sundials could not offer after dark, allowing priests to perform rituals at precisely ordained moments, night or day. This was not just timekeeping, it was the synchronization of an entire society to a celestial and divine schedule. The pursuit of astronomical precision reached a breathtaking peak in ancient China, where temple astronomers constructed elaborate armillary spheres. These intricate bronze models of the cosmos, with rings representing the celestial equator, ecliptic, and meridian, allowed them to visualize and calculate the complex dances of the stars and planets. It was a physical simulation, an analog computer that turned the abstract sky into a tangible, manipulable map. But the most crucial innovation for any library is the ability to find what you need. Temple archivists developed primitive indexing systems, using tags and catalogs to organize their scroll collections. A scholar in Alexandria could consult a master list, a precursor to a search engine, to locate a specific medical text or philosophical treatise among hundreds of thousands without a desperate, hours-long search. Even the architecture itself was engineered for data transmission. The perfect acoustics of Greek theaters, often dedicated to Dionysus and thus part of a temple complex, were no accident. The curved seating amplified a speaker's voice, allowing a single philosopher or playwright to disseminate new ideas or preserve epic poems to an audience of thousands with perfect clarity. Every hum and whisper of knowledge was carried effortlessly to the back row. This relentless drive to refine their tools reveals a profound truth about these ancient institutions. They were not static repositories clinging to old methods. They were dynamic hubs of innovation, constantly adapting the best available technology to enhance the efficiency, accuracy, and reach of their knowledge systems. The very principles they established, from data processing to information retrieval, would echo for millennia. Their ingenuity forces us to wonder what underlying philosophy, what core belief about the universe could inspire such a systematic and enduring pursuit of order. Underlying every scroll and stone inscription was a powerful philosophical engine. The ancient priests did not just collect facts at random, they organized their entire world of knowledge according to a deep-seated belief in a cosmic order. They were convinced the universe was rational, structured, and ultimately knowable, and this conviction shaped their databases down to the very last clay tablet. In the Greek world, this took the form of Platonic idealism. Philosophers like Plato, who were deeply influenced by earlier temple traditions, argued that the messy, physical world we perceive is just a shadow of a higher, perfect realm of ideal forms. This wasn't an abstract theory, it was a practical guide for organizing knowledge. A Greek scholar categorizing plants in a temple dedicated to Asclepius wasn't just making a list, he was attempting to group individual specimens under their perfect, universal form, seeking the essential truth of what a healing herb truly was. This philosophical lens transformed data collection into a sacred pursuit of eternal truths, elevating it far beyond simple record-keeping. Across the world, a parallel concept structured the vast libraries of Hindu temples, the principle of Dharma. Dharma is not merely a word for religion or duty, it is the fundamental law that upholds the entire cosmos, the ethical and cosmic order that keeps reality in balance. This single idea provided the ultimate framework for organizing everything. Legal texts were not separate from spiritual manuals because both were guides to living in accordance with Dharma. Medical knowledge was intertwined with ethical codes, as a healthy body and a moral life were both seen as necessary for maintaining cosmic harmony. A text on astronomy and a scroll on statecraft were two different expressions of the same underlying, orderly principle. This is why their knowledge systems felt so integrated. Every piece of data was a thread in the same magnificent tapestry. This shared philosophical bedrock, the belief in a comprehensible cosmic order, is what fueled the relentless drive to record patterns in nature. A Babylonian priest tracking the path of Mars wasn't just filling a ledger. He was reading the handwriting of the gods, deciphering a divine message written in the predictable language of mathematics. He believed that by meticulously logging this celestial data, he was not only serving his king, but also participating in the revelation of a universal truth. The very act of observation was a form of reverence. This philosophical context is what separates an ancient temple database from a modern server farm. Our servers hold data that is largely neutral, bits of information waiting for us to assign them meaning. But for the temple scribe, every single data point, from the price of barley to the orbit of Jupiter, was already intrinsically meaningful, already connected to a grand divine scheme. The data was sacred because the universe itself was a sacred text, and they were its most devoted readers. This profound synthesis of philosophy and practical knowledge created systems that were not only functional but also deeply resilient, designed to preserve not just information, but an entire way of seeing the world. The principles that govern those ancient stone libraries are surprisingly alive in our digital world today. Think of the meticulous categorization of Sumerian clay tablets, grouped by subject in labeled baskets. This is the direct ancestor of the folders and relational databases on your computer, a system designed not just to store information, but to make it findable. The temple priests who controlled access to sacred scripts were the original system administrators, their rigorous training and selective initiation mirroring the modern IT specialist who manages user permissions and safeguards a network's integrity. Both roles are built on a fundamental truth that data is power, and that power must be carefully managed. The ancient drive for redundancy, carving vital texts into both papyrus and granite, finds its perfect echo in our practice of cloud storage and distributed server backups. We are still fighting the same battle against entropy, ensuring that a single point of failure cannot erase our collective memory. Even the use of symbolic encoding in temple art, where a myth held layers of hidden meaning for the initiated, prefigures our complex data encryption. In both cases, the information is secured behind a veil, decipherable only to those who possess the key. Yet for all these profound similarities, a fundamental difference defines our age. The knowledge housed within a temple was often deeply localized and exclusive, accessible only to a privileged priestly class within its physical walls. Our digital databases, in contrast, promise instant, global access, theoretically placing the entirety of human knowledge at the fingertips of anyone with an internet connection. This shift from exclusive to inclusive access represents one of humanity's greatest revolutions. Reflecting on this parallel journey reveals something essential. The core challenges of knowledge management are timeless. We are still striving to collect, organize, secure, and preserve information. The solutions have evolved from clay and memory to silicon and light, but the underlying human impulse remains unchanged. This long view invites a crucial question. Having achieved this miracle of global access, what enduring wisdom from those early systems have we perhaps left behind in our rush toward digital ubiquity? Our modern digital world champions specialization, but the ancient temple offers a powerful corrective, a lesson in the profound strength of integration. These institutions never separated astronomy from poetry or medicine from mythology. They understood that true wisdom emerges from the connections between different fields. A priest diagnosing an illness drew upon herbal knowledge, spiritual incantations, and an understanding of the patient's place in the community. This holistic approach ensured that knowledge remained relevant to the whole human experience, not just an isolated technical problem. Our contemporary education and data management often silo information into disconnected categories, but the temple model suggests that the most innovative solutions are found at the intersections, where science meets art and data meets meaning. Their strategy for survival was equally integrated, relying on a multi-layered defense against oblivion. They never trusted a single method. Vital knowledge was simultaneously committed to human memory through oral tradition, recorded on portable scrolls for wide dissemination, and carved into monumental architecture for permanence. This redundancy created an incredibly resilient system. If a fire destroyed the library, the oral reciters could rebuild it. If a dynasty fell and the oral traditions faltered, the stone inscriptions remained, waiting to be read by future generations. This is a crucial model for our own digital preservation. We cannot rely solely on cloud servers or magnetic tapes, which can become obsolete or corrupted in a few decades. We must also invest in physical archives, in printed books, and in the education of skilled humans who can understand and interpret the data, creating a diverse ecosystem of preservation that can withstand any single point of failure. This human element was the heart of the system. The priest scholars were not passive custodians, they were dedicated curators. Their lifelong training equipped them not just to store information, but to contextualize it, verify its accuracy, and pass it on with nuanced understanding. They were the living algorithms that gave the data its purpose and relevance. In our era of automated data scraping and algorithmic feeds, we have undervalued the role of the human curator, the librarian, the archivist, and the teacher. These are the modern equivalents of the temple scribe, whose expertise guides us through the noise, helping us distinguish signal from static and ensuring that knowledge is not just accumulated, but wisely applied. Furthermore, these temples were not isolated islands of wisdom. They formed the first global network, actively fostering cross-cultural exchange. Greek philosophers studied in Egypt, Indian mathematical concepts traveled west to Baghdad, and Silk Road monasteries swapped texts from China to the Mediterranean. This open, yet structured, sharing of knowledge accelerated innovation for every civilization involved. It is a powerful argument for open access and international collaboration in science and culture today. When we build walls around data, whether for corporate profit or national security, we are repeating the mistakes of the most insular ancient kingdoms, stifling the very progress that comes from a free exchange of ideas. These ancient lessons culminate in a single, vital insight for our digital age: the need to balance relentless innovation with the wisdom of tradition. The temples were brilliant innovators, adopting every new technology from the abacus to the water clock. Yet they always used these tools in service of preserving their civilization's core values and accumulated knowledge. They understood that technology is a means, not an end. Our challenge today is to achieve the same balance, harnessing the incredible power of our digital databases without losing the human-centric, holistic, and resilient qualities that made the ancient systems so enduring. The ultimate impact of these temple databases was not merely the information they held, but the stable, sophisticated societies they enabled to flourish for centuries. This centralized control of knowledge was the invisible architecture supporting the entire civilization. With the temple acting as a trusted, impartial repository, it could administer a legal system based on documented precedent rather than the whims of a local chieftain. A dispute over land ownership did not have to descend into a bloody feud. It could be settled by a priest retrieving a clay tablet that recorded the original property boundaries or sale agreement. This transparent documentation, rooted in the authority of the gods, reduced social conflicts and created a predictable environment where commerce and community could flourish. The meticulous economic records enabled a fairer, more efficient form of taxation. Instead of arbitrary confiscation, contributions were based on documented harvest yields and wealth, which allowed the state to plan and redistribute resources during times of famine. This data-driven governance prevented societal collapse when crops failed, as the temple granaries, managed by those same scribes, could be opened according to pre-established rules, not panic. The impact on public health was equally profound. Medical archives compiled from generations of case studies gave healers a growing body of reference material. While not every cure was effective, this centralized storage of medical knowledge meant that a successful treatment for a burn or a broken bone discovered in one city could be replicated in another, slowly raising the overall health of the population. The most direct impact on daily life came from the heavens. The temple's astronomical data was the key to food security. By predicting the Nile's flood or the arrival of the monsoon rains with remarkable accuracy, priests could advise farmers on the optimal planting times, leading to larger, more reliable harvests that could support growing urban populations. This was not abstract science, it was a vital tool for preventing mass starvation. Beyond these practical necessities, temples wove the very fabric of social identity. By preserving and reciting epic poems, genealogies, and creation myths, they provided a shared story that bound scattered communities into a single people. Everyone, from the farmer to the pharaoh, understood their place within a grand, cosmic narrative upheld by the temple. This fostered a powerful sense of belonging and purpose that stabilized society for centuries. And for a select few, the temple offered a path to influence. Temple schools were one of the only avenues for upward mobility, where a gifted boy from a common family could, through rigorous education, rise to become a scribe or a junior administrator. Yet this opportunity was a double-edged sword, as access was almost always restricted to a male elite, reinforcing the very social hierarchies it occasionally transcended. This dual role, as both the guardian of ancient tradition and the engine of pragmatic progress, demonstrates how a single, well-organized knowledge system can shape every facet of a civilization. The temple provided the stability for society to endure and the specialized knowledge for it to advance. But what happens when these pillars of civilization themselves begin to crumble? The eventual unraveling of these systems would test the resilience of their stored wisdom in ways their architects could never have foreseen. Yet even the most resilient stone libraries are not immune to the tides of history. The world began to change, and with it, the very definition of a knowledge hub. Across the Mediterranean, new institutions emerged that were dedicated not to the glory of a god, but to the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. The great philosophical schools of Athens, and later the universities in cities like Bologna and Oxford, became the new centers of learning. These were secular spaces where debate flourished, and the curriculum, while still deeply influenced by theology, was slowly branching out into independent fields of law, medicine, and natural philosophy. The temple was no longer the sole gateway to advanced understanding. This intellectual shift was matched by dramatic political upheaval. When the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, the landscape of knowledge was fundamentally altered. The vast network of pagan temples, which had served as archives for centuries, were systematically closed, repurposed into churches, or dismantled. In many cases, their priceless libraries of scrolls, seen as relics of a rejected faith, were left to rot or were deliberately burned. Imagine the sheer volume of data lost when a single temple complex like the Serapeum in Alexandria was destroyed, its unique collections of Hellenistic and Egyptian thought turning to ash. This was a catastrophic deletion of cultural memory. The loss was not always born from religious conflict. Military conquest could be just as devastating. The Mongol sack of Baghdad in the 13th century resulted in the utter destruction of the House of Wisdom, one of the greatest libraries since Alexandria. It was said that the waters of the Tigris River ran black with the ink from countless manuscripts and red from the blood of scholars. Such events were more than just military victories. They were targeted attacks on the very knowledge infrastructure of a civilization, a deliberate wiping of its primary hard drive. But the story does not end in ashes. The knowledge itself was often too valuable to vanish completely. It found new homes and new guardians. In the West, Christian monasteries became the unexpected heirs to this ancient legacy. Within the quiet scriptoria of places like Monte Cassino, teams of monks meticulously copied not only biblical texts, but also the surviving works of Greek and Roman philosophers, physicians, and astronomers. They were the new scribes, preserving the old databases on parchment for a new age. In the East, royal courts and imperial libraries took up the mantle, with caliphs and emperors sponsoring the translation and preservation of knowledge from conquered territories. The system adapted, the data migrated. This great transformation highlights a crucial truth about knowledge: it is fluid. It can survive the collapse of the institutions that created it. The physical hubs changed from temple to monastery, from royal archive to university library, but the core function of collecting, preserving, and transmitting information endured. The centralization of the temple era gave way to a more distributed, resilient network. No single fire or invasion could destroy all the copies of Aristotle's works when they were scattered across a continent in 100 different monastic cells. This diffusion, while sometimes chaotic, ultimately paved the way for the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, creating the fertile ground from which our own modern information age would eventually grow. The proof of these ancient databases is not just a theoretical idea, it is being dug up from the earth, piece by astonishing piece. In the ruins of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh, archaeologists uncovered a trove of over 30,000 cuneiform tablets. This was not a random collection, it was a systematic archive, a royal effort to centralize all known Mesopotamian knowledge. The tablets were meticulously organized by subject, with catalog summaries acting as a primitive search engine. Within these clay files, scholars found the entire epic of Gilgamesh, alongside precise medical diagnoses, complex mathematical problems, and detailed omen texts that linked celestial events to earthly outcomes. This single discovery confirmed the temple and palace as a unified knowledge hub, a physical server farm from the 7th century before the Common Era. Each tablet was a data point, and the library itself was the hard drive, offering undeniable proof of how a civilization structured its intellectual world. Across the Mediterranean, in Egypt, the sands yielded another revelation, the Tebtunis Temple Library. Here, excavators found papyrus scrolls that had survived for 2 millennia, preserving texts on temple administration, astronomy, and medicine. One scroll might detail the proper rituals for a festival, while the next contained a sophisticated medical treatise on treating eye diseases. This mix of the spiritual and the scientific in a single cache perfectly illustrates the temple's role as an integrated knowledge center, where every facet of understanding was preserved under one sacred roof. The work of recovering this data has entered a new technological age. Today, advanced imaging techniques like multispectral analysis can peer into the past in ways once thought impossible. Researchers are now able to virtually unroll carbonized scrolls from Roman temples, scrolls that were burned in volcanic eruptions and fused into solid, blackened lumps. These lumps, which would crumble at a touch, can now be read non-invasively, their ink revealed through different wavelengths of light. This process is recovering long-lost philosophical texts, forgotten poems, and scientific works, literally pulling them from the ashes. Each of these discoveries, from a humble accounting tablet to a virtually resurrected library, adds another piece to the puzzle. They provide tangible, physical evidence of ancient data management on a staggering scale. We are not just interpreting inscriptions on a wall, we are holding the original filing cabinets, the very clay and papyrus that a priest scholar used to update his civilization's records. This ongoing archaeological work continues to reveal the breathtaking depth of what was stored in these stone libraries, forcing us to constantly revise our understanding of ancient intellect. It also invites a humbling reflection. For every archive we uncover, how many more still lie buried, waiting to tell their stories? Scholars have pieced together theoretical models to understand the master plan behind these ancient databases. One compelling idea is the encyclopedic model, where knowledge was not stored in isolated silos but existed as a vast, interconnected web. A single celestial event, like an eclipse, was not just an astronomical entry. It was a node connected to agricultural data, influencing planting schedules, to theological texts, where it was interpreted as a divine omen, and to historical records where it might date a king's coronation. This reflects a world view where every piece of information was part of a single, unified truth. In stark contrast, the hierarchical model suggests that access to this web was strictly tiered. A novice priest might learn the basic rituals and myths, the public-facing data of the temple. Deeper knowledge, like advanced astronomical calculations, complex medical procedures, or the esoteric meanings behind symbols, was reserved for senior initiates who had undergone decades of training. This wasn't merely about secrecy, It was a form of information security and a quality control mechanism, ensuring that the most powerful ideas were handled only by those with the maturity and expertise to apply them correctly. Further evidence of this systematic thinking is found in the meticulous metrological systems temples developed. Standardized units for measuring land, grain, and precious metals were more than just tools for commerce. They were a mathematical framework for organizing reality itself. By reducing the chaotic variety of the physical world into countable, comparable units, priest administrators could impose a logical order on everything from tax collection to architectural blueprints. This mathematical approach to organization feels strikingly modern. It prefigures our own use of taxonomies and ontologies in information science, where we create structured relationships between data points so computers can process and retrieve information intelligently. The ancient priests were building a conceptual map of their entire world, a map where a plot of land, a volume of grain, and the orbit of a planet could all be understood through the same logical principles. Analyzing these frameworks reveals the incredible intellectual rigor of the temple keepers. They were not just hoarding scrolls, they were pioneering the science of information itself, developing sophisticated systems for making knowledge usable and enduring. This very power to structure and control information inevitably leads to a profound ethical question, one that echoes in our own digital age. Who was granted access to this vast library of human understanding and who was deliberately kept outside its walls? This gatekeeping of wisdom created a deep and enduring divide. The priestly class, fluent in the sacred scripts and trained in the temple schools, held the keys to the entire system. They could read the stars, understand the law, and access advanced medical knowledge, while the farmer or artisan outside the temple walls remained reliant on their oral traditions and the priest's interpretations. This monopoly on information reinforced social hierarchies, often codifying them into rigid structures like the caste system in India, where birth, not merit, determined one's access to sacred texts and the power they contained. Yet this secrecy was not purely about maintaining power. It also served as a protective firewall. Imagine a complex ritual designed to commune with the gods. In the wrong hands, performed incorrectly, it was believed the ceremony could bring calamity upon the entire community. Similarly, advanced medical knowledge about potent herbs or surgical procedures could be incredibly dangerous if misapplied by an untrained person. The control over such sensitive data was seen not just as a privilege but as a solemn responsibility to prevent harm. This ancient ethical dilemma is startlingly familiar. We grapple with the same core questions today. Should a government surveillance data be entirely transparent to its citizens, or does some secrecy ensure national security? Do tech companies have the right to protect their algorithms as trade secrets, or does the public have a right to understand the systems that shape their lives? The ancient temple administrators were the first to face this fundamental tension between the right to know and the need to protect. Their choices, etched into stone and scroll, remind us that information is never neutral. It is always embedded with power, and its management is an act of profound moral consequence. The legacy of their decisions, the societies they stabilized, and the inequalities they entrenched, forces us to look at our own digital world and ask, who are the gatekeepers of our global database, and what ethical framework guides their hands? You can walk into any public library today and see the ghost of an ancient temple. The quiet halls, the neatly organized shelves, the trained librarians guiding seekers to the information they need. This is the direct descendant of the temple's house of life. Our modern institutions of knowledge, from universities to museums, are built upon a foundation laid by those first priest scholars. they inherited the same core mission to preserve, organize, and disseminate the collective wisdom of our species, ensuring it is not lost to time. The organizational principles are strikingly similar. The Dewey Decimal System, which classifies every book under a precise numerical code, is the spiritual successor to the labeled baskets of cuneiform tablets in a Sumerian archive. Both systems are designed to answer the same fundamental question: how do you find one specific piece of information in a sea of data? The answer is a logical, hierarchical structure, a concept perfected within temple walls. The role of the expert curator has also been passed down. The university professor, the museum archivist, the research scientist, these are our modern equivalents of the temple scribe. They are the dedicated individuals who spend their lives mastering a specific domain, verifying the accuracy of new information, and deciding what knowledge is valuable enough to be added to the permanent collection. They are the living filters that ensure the integrity of our vast digital and physical libraries. Even our religious institutions continue this ancient model. The Vatican archives, for instance, are not merely repositories of theological texts. They hold centuries of historical letters, scientific treatises, and artistic works, a seamless blend of spiritual and secular records that mirrors the integrated collections of an Egyptian temple library. This enduring legacy underscores a profound continuity in the human project. We are still striving to harness knowledge for progress, using ever more sophisticated tools to solve the same basic challenges of preservation and access. Recognizing this deep history reframes our relationship with information. It is not a modern invention but a timeless human endeavor. The servers that host our digital world and the libraries that guard our printed past are the latest chapters in a story that began with clay tablets in sun-baked temples. This long arc of history invites a final, personal reflection. What responsibility do we now bear as the curators of humanity's most powerful and accessible knowledge system ever created? This realization fundamentally rewrites the story of human progress. For centuries, we viewed ancient civilizations through a lens of mysticism and superstition, picturing priests as mere mystics lost in ritual. Now we see them for what they were, the world's first chief information officers, running sophisticated data centers that managed the very lifeblood of their societies. It dismantles the arrogant assumption that complex information management is a purely modern invention, born from silicon and code. The drive to collect, organize, and secure knowledge is not new. It is a timeless human impulse, and the temple was its most powerful early expression. This perspective weaves a continuous thread through history, connecting the clay tablet to the cloud server. It reveals a pattern of innovation and adaptation, where each era builds upon the informational frameworks of the last. The medieval monastery preserved the temple's function, the university expanded its educational role, and the modern library democratized its access. Seeing this unbroken chain forces us to ask a critical question of our own time. How can we design our digital systems to be as resilient as those stone archives? We are facing our own preservation crisis, with file formats becoming obsolete and digital storage media degrading within decades. The ancient model of redundancy, carving knowledge into both portable scrolls and immovable stone, offers a powerful lesson. It argues for a multi-layered approach to saving our digital heritage, combining cloud storage with physical archives and, crucially, maintaining the human expertise to interpret it all. This broader view culminates in a humbling truth: the quest for knowledge is the engine of our species. It is what compelled a priest to track a star's path and what drives a programmer to write a new algorithm. By recognizing the temple as an ancient database, we do more than just understand the past. We see a reflection of our own deepest drive to make sense of the world, to build structures of understanding that can outlast our own brief lives. Our journey through these stone libraries brings us to a final, unifying insight about the nature of knowledge itself. The echoes of those stone libraries remind us that every byte in our digital cloud has a history stretching back millennia. We have walked through these ancient halls together, seeing how their very architecture safeguarded celestial data, how priest scholars became living servers, and how symbols encoded entire philosophies. This was not mere record-keeping, it was the conscious construction of a civilization's memory, a system designed for integration and longevity. The core principles they established are startlingly modern: the need for redundant backups, the power of a unified data framework, and the profound ethical weight of controlling information. Our challenge now is to learn from their wisdom. We must build our own digital repositories with the same foresight, blending technological innovation with the human-centric values of curation and holistic understanding. The past has handed us a blueprint, not for the technology itself, but for the purpose behind it, to use knowledge not just for power, but for enduring stability and collective growth. If this journey through the world's first databases has reshaped your view of history, we would love to hear your reflections in the comments below. For more explorations that connect ancient mysteries to our modern world, be sure to subscribe. The foundations of our information age were not forged in silicon alone, but in the timeless human drive to preserve wisdom, a story literally written in stone.